Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be making my picks for week 4 of the 2023 season of the Overwatch League. This video is just going to be the Western Region games, the 9 Western Region games we have this weekend. I'm going to have a separate video out tomorrow where I give my bracket predictions for the Eastern Region Spring Stage Knockouts, both the A and B bracket, so keep your eyes out for that tomorrow. But today we are just talking about the Western Region games. So let's go and let's dive in and let's talk about the first game on the docket, which is the Vegas Eternal taking on the Boston Uprising. This one feels pretty straightforward. Vegas Eternal right now look to be the worst team in the Western region, arguably the worst team in the league. They have not really had a ton of success. They have one map win under their belt. They've been a struggling team so far. Uprising, we did not see them play last weekend. When we did see them last, they did get 3-0'd by the Vancouver Titans, but also had a 3-0 win over the Washington Justice, who look to be a pretty good team right now. So Boston, bit of a weird team. Obviously, Izayaki just recently returned to the team. Don't know if we'll see him yet. But I don't really think the Uprising should really be challenged by a Vegas Eternal team that we just have not seen do really much of anything this season. So, to me, pretty clear-cut 3-0 victory for the Uprising. I think they're a much better team than the Eternal right now. Not really much of a competition, and so to me, give me the Uprising to take this one 3-0, kind of help themselves bounce back up towards the top of this Western region. Moving on now, we have the Vancouver Titans taking on the London Spitfire. Like I said with the Uprising pick, the Titans recently, with a big 3-0 victory over the Boston Uprising, they've put themselves in a pretty good position, 2-2, +1. Better than a lot of people may have expected from them early in the season. That win over the Uprising, kind of a big staple win for them so far this season. Now they're playing against a weaker opponent in the London Spitfire, struggling a bit this season. They do have a win under their belt, though it was against the Vegas Eternal. Titans, I think, have a much higher ceiling from what we've seen out of them. I think Sugar Free looks really good. I think Aspire looks really good. I think Punk looks really good. Faith and Crimzo. Faith was one of my bigger complaints with this team in the preseason. I thought he was kind of the weakest spot on this team. His main support play, as long as he can play main support, is very solid. His Brig and Lucio looked very good so far for this team. So I think the Titans have much higher potential right now than what we've seen out of the Spitfire. I think the Titans should be able to take this game. I will give the Spitfire a map and say it is a 3-1 victory for the Titans, because I do think there is some bright spots on the Spitfire roster. I think certain compositions, certain maps, the way that they play, they can definitely force rush compositions and rush styles in a way that could hurt the Spitfire. But maps are a huge part of the series. I don't know what the map pool is, unfortunately. But the Titans are a team that when they beat Boston, I think a lot of that came down to the fact that the Titans could play to their strengths and their comfort. And when they can do that, they look really good. I think if they can do that against the Uprising, I don't think they'll have much of an issue doing that against Spitfire, so give me the Titans in that one. Up next, we have the LA Valiant taking on the Toronto Defiant. Two teams that are not in great positions right now. LA Valiant 0-6, Toronto Defiant 1-3. Not really much to write home about. The Defiant's one win was a close 3-2 match against the New York Excelsior. The Valiant did lose to New York 3-1 a couple of weeks ago, so this, to me, is kind of one of those games that this is really where we see where these two teams are at. The Defiant have not had much of anything going their way so far. They've had some tough opposition. They did have to play the Mayhem and the Gladiators, two games they did not walk away from with a win. They lost to the San Francisco Shock, a very close 3-2 series there. Shock right now look to be kind of down. And, their one win, like I said, was against a New York team, and it was very close. So, realistically, to me, the Defiant have not looked like the high-level team we thought they would. Whereas the Valiant, they've been kind of stringing some stuff together. They had a very close series against the Florida Mayhem this past weekend. Mayhem, very good team, generally kind of widely regarded as one of the top-level teams in the league right now. So, when you look at what you have here, this is a matchup towards the bottom. I believe it's the 10th, or the 11th versus 13th team right now in terms of standings in this Western region. I think this is going to be a really interesting game to watch. To me, this is a much bigger game for the Defiant. They have a lot more pressure on them. They have a lot more kind of need to perform, because if you look at this team on paper, A lot of this team is Team USA in the World Cup. You know, this is a team that realistically needs to look better and make more improvements from when we last saw them. They've had a week off. I think that gives them time to kind of bounce back. I said the same thing about the Shock last week. Shock did not look very good last week. I think the Titans right now are in a bit of a, or not the Titans, the Defiant are in a bit of a better position in terms of just kind of, they're playing together. They're in a kind of good team environment. They have some more of that time. No Hill, I don't know if he's with the team yet, but he seemingly will be with the team soon. The Valiant don't have the same infrastructure that the Defiant have. I think the Valiant look better. I don't think they're at a place yet where I can pick them to win a match. So I am going to take the Defiant in this one by a score, though, of 3-2. I think the Valiant can push them. Seeker has been very, very good. I think if he is able to play well and he's able to kind of slow down the Defiant a bit, put them on their kind of back feet, put them on their toes, I think that the Valiant can challenge the Defiant pretty well. But I think the Defiant should be able to close this one out and take the win over the Valiant. Up next, we have a nuclear bomb versus coughing baby matchup. The Vegas Eternal versus the LA Gladiators. Vegas Eternal, tough weekend for them, having to play two of the top teams in the league right now. Despite the fact that the Gladiators are 2-2, -3, their two losses were to the Houston Outlaws and the Atlanta Reign, the two best teams in the region right now. And the Gladiators have wins over the Mayhem and over the Defiant. The Vegas Eternal should not be a challenge for this Gladiators roster. They are the better team in this matchup, far and away. Their strength is the Eternal's weakness, and the Gladiators across the board are just a much more well-rounded team. They have a lot of really good talent on that team. I don't think this game will be close. I think it will be a 3-0 win for the LA Gladiators. They're just better, right? There is no way around it. There's no sugarcoating it. They are the better roster if you compare them to the Vegas Eternal. It's not even close. So yes, give me the Gladiators 3-0 here. I think this is a pretty clear and obvious one to go in favor of the Gladiators. Up next, we have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Houston Outlaws. A game that we did see in the Pro-Am. It was a pretty close matchup, all things considered. But now we are seeing an Outlaws team that is on the rise in a meta that they feel really comfortable in. They had a good game against the Atlanta Reign last week. And a Shock team that feels lost. That feels like they don't really have the direction you want to see out of them. They don't seemingly feel super comfortable in this. And they have been struggling a lot more than you would have expected. Now, nothing would be more Houston Outlaws than losing to the San Francisco Shock, who are struggling right now in like a really bad fashion. Like that would be an Outlaws moment. That would be Houstonable. That would totally not surprise me. But right now, based on what I have seen out of the Shock and the Outlaws, I just do not see a world in which the Shock are able to take this win. It was close in the Pro-Am, sure. I think the Pro-Am, Houston was not playing their best. I think they've looked better ever since then. I think the Outlaws just outclassed the Shock in a lot of places. The support line in particular. Shu and Violet have looked way better than Finn and Vindime. We thought Finn and Vindime would look very good, and they just have not had any real kind of performance. Fearless has looked really, really good. Pelican and Happy have looked really good. Across the board, the Outlaws look together. They look coordinated. The Shock struggled against the Reign a lot, and I don't think they're going to be able to find much more success here. So I'm going to say it's a 3-0 for the Houston Outlaws over the Shock. I just don't see the Shock right now doing much of anything. They have not impressed me. They have not looked good. And so to me, give me the Outlaws to take this one in a pretty dominant fashion. Up next, we have my first of two big pick games this week. The Toronto Defiant taking on the Boston Uprising. When these two teams matched up in the Pro-Am, it was close. It was a win for the Toronto Defiant, stopping the Uprising's attempt at a reverse sweep. Uprising struggled a bit in that game. The notorious Birdring stopped by a pole game where his Deadeye failed on Antarctic Peninsula literally because of a pole blocking one of his shots. But these are two teams in very interesting places right now. Boston seemingly on a bit of a high since that Pro-Am, though they did have that loss to the Titans that people kind of saw as a bit of a down-to-earth moment for the Uprising. But they've had the week off. Maybe Izayaki is able to play. We don't know just yet. On the other hand, you have the Toronto Defiant, who are coming off of a very, very, very weak start to the season. Yes, they beat New York the last time we saw them, Well, last time we saw them was a loss, but 2 weeks ago we did see them get a win over New York. But it wasn't convincing. And Boston did also play New York, and that was a very convincing game for Boston. So I look at this game, and I think it's very interesting where we are, because both these teams have been off for the week. We don't know where the cooking's been happening. We don't know what kind of cooking's been going on. Presumably, both of these teams have been working to really improve so far. And what I think is very interesting about these teams is, realistically, I think Boston's strengths are Toronto's weaknesses, and Toronto's strengths are Boston's weaknesses. Boston is going to love any map where they can play Winston. Any main tank map is way better for them because Smurf is just that good of a player. When they put Kalios in, the team's level of play does go down. I don't think Kalios is a bad player. I think it's understandable why he's on the roster. I think it's understandable why he comes in to play the off tanks, because I think he is more comfortable on those heroes. But I do think that overall the team has performed weaker on those off tank maps. I think the big reason why they lost to Vancouver was the fact that that series was very off tank map heavy. That first map was very close and Smurf was in, but once they had to go over to Kalios and they couldn't play to their strengths, the series kind of came out of hand. So that's really what I'm looking at here. The tank matchup is a huge part of this game, and the consistency out of kind of your backline and those damage dealers is really what I want to see as kind of the matchup here. But I just have to feel more confident in Boston right now. I think they look a lot better. Yes, they lost the last time we saw them. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think a kind of down-to-earth result can help you out as a team. Having that time off is helpful as a team. They've had a lot going on, obviously, with Izayaki suffering that collapse lung. Finally back with the team. Even if he doesn't play, he's at least there. He's at least a presence now with the team. He can be there for emotional help. He can be there to kind of help guide the team even if he's not playing. So I do think Boston will take this win. I think they look better right now. And I think it's going to be a 3-1. Toronto have just not shown me enough right now. I think this is the week where we have to see them look better. I think if they don't win against the Valiant in a convincing fashion, they're in a lot of trouble. And if they don't beat the Valiant convincingly, I absolutely think Boston will dominate this series. I predicted a 3-2 for the Defiant against the Valiant. I think this one will be a 3-1, just because I think that Defiant have what it takes to take a map. I don't think they're a bad team. They have a lot of talent. I think they just suffer in certain areas. But I think map-wise, I think there are certain maps where they will just be the better team, or they'll feel more comfortable, and I think they can take those. But we'll see what happens in this matchup. It's one of the ones I'm definitely interested in, and that is why it is my first of the 2 big pick games. Speaking of big pick games, let's talk about the second one, which is the Vancouver Titans taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. 2 very good teams right now. Titans, bit of a surprise of how good they are, like I said before. Gladiators, despite their 2-2 record, look to be one of the most kind of dominant teams in the league right now, with 2 losses to 2 of the best teams in the world. So I feel very good about the Gladiators. These 2 teams have a same 2-2 record. Titans with a bit of a better differential. So this will be an interesting matchup to see. I think both of these teams should be coming off of good first matches earlier in the week. I think this looks like it is the best match of the weekend, because there's a lot of really solid talent on this kind of lineup here. 2 really good damage dealers on the Vancouver Titans with Aspire and Sugar Free going up against a really good damage trio with the Gladiators. Kevster, Kai, Yaki. Really good group there. Kind of the 2 teams with solo tanks who are doing a lot with Punk on the Titans, Dante on the Gladiators. And then you have support lines, which I think are probably the bigger question marks for all of these rosters. Not that they're bad, but they're definitely the part that you say, if the meta shifts a certain way, how will they look? Gladiators are a little more meta resistant because they have the double flex and they also have Funny Astro. The Titans only have 2 supports, 1 flex, 1 main. So these 2 teams in kind of similar places in a lot of ways. They have superstars across the roster. So I think this has the makings to be a really good matchup. I really like what we've seen out of both of these teams so far this season, and I think they're 2 teams that, despite having middle-of-the-pack records, are certainly punching with the big dogs. But the Gladiators have done it a little bit more in terms of how we've seen it. If we consider teams like Florida, and if we consider teams like, say, the Justice, the Uprising, if we consider those to be kind of the category that you want to see out of the Gladiators, because clearly they've lost to the Reign and the Outlaws. But if they can compete with teams like Boston, Washington, Florida, Vancouver, like those are the teams around them, that you're kind of looking to see if they can compete with. And right now, I think the Gladiators can. I think we've seen from them very good play. I think they look a lot better week after week. I think that as Dante becomes more comfortable in tank, this team just looks better. They know what they do. They have their own identity. They know where Dante's strengths and weaknesses are. And so they avoid his weaknesses as much as possible and enable him to be his best possible player. I think they're a really well-coached team, really well just kind of run team. So I think they're going to take this series. But I think it'll be pretty good. Despite the fact that I think it'll be good, I don't think it will be a 5-map series. I do think it'll be 3-1 for the Gladiators. I think they're going to take it. I think that the Titans have the potential to just kind of wreck games a bit with Sugar Free and with Aspire. We saw it happen against the Uprising where Sugar Free just kind of turned maps. That control map was so good from him. And even when we saw the kind of really nice hit scan matchup in that Titans Uprising match between Aspire and Birdring, you know that you're getting really good players and play out of most of the players on this Titans roster, if not all of them. Same thing with the Gladiators. So I think it'll be a good matchup. It's two really good teams. But right now, I think the Gladiators are probably top 3 in the Western region. I don't think the Titans are there just yet. And so I think the Gladiators take this one, like I said, 3-1. Next, we have the London Spitfire taking on the Houston Outlaws. Houston, really, really good. They look like I said before, arguably top 2 team in the region. Spitfire, they don't look all that great right now. I think this one should be a pretty easy game for the Outlaws. I think they're the better team. We've seen way more of them, and the Spitfire just have not inspired me enough with their play. So I'm going to say this is a 3-0 win for the Outlaws. I don't think that's a huge surprise. I think that's what most people expect. The Outlaws' only map losses so far this season are to the Atlanta Reign. So give me the Outlaws in this one. I think they're just the better team, and I think they're going to take this one convincingly over a weaker Spitfire roster. Final match of the weekend is the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the San Francisco Shock. This is an interesting game. I think this game has a lot of intrigue because these are two teams in kind of weird places. Shock are struggling. They don't look very good. Valiant, despite the fact that they aren't kind of very good record-wise, there's something there. There's this feeling that something there is clicking, that something's working in a way that we haven't necessarily thought about. Especially with Seeker on that damage lineup, in that damage role. Seeker seems like he is the piece that the Valiant will have to kind of live or die by. Crawley looks pretty good as well. The Valiant know what they are, right? They have an identity, they have a kind of core. Their peaks are not as high as a lot of other teams in the league, and that is kind of their weakness here. But I think that they have beaten the kind of their floor so far this season. Their floor was like they're the worst team in the league, and they've been competitive with some very solid players. It's a very solid roster so far. The Shock, kind of chaotic. There's a lot of turmoil there, but the Shock have, in my opinion, they have won the games that they realistically should have won when you look at their opposition, right? They beat Toronto. They're a better team than Toronto. They beat the New York Excelsior. They're a better team than New York. The exception being their loss to the Justice, where a lot of people would have thought the Justice are not as good as the Shock. So I think there is reason to be concerned about the Shock, but I don't think the Shock are at losing to the bottom of the bottom teams in the region right now. Vegas, Valiant. I think they're better than those two teams. I think they should be able to find a win against the Valiant. But I do want to give some credit to the Valiant for how they've looked so far. So I'm going to say it's a 3-1 win for the Shock. I think the Valiant will be able to keep it somewhat competitive. I think they can take a map, but right now, I think you have to favor the Shock. Even though they haven't looked great, I think that their low is still better than what we have seen so far from the LA Valiant. So that's it. That's the picks for this week in the Western region. Let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? If you do disagree with me, where and why? And if you agree with me, why? Anything like that, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. But that is going to be all from me for today. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. That's all for today. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.